Dylan, how are you? Welcome today. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm good. I'm so happy to be here.
So, Dylan was a beautiful client of mine for a couple of years. It's actually 3 years ago that we met and started her journey together. And I wanted to have her today to share her journey and the work that we did over the 2 years that we worked together. So, my first question for you is, what were you struggling with, Dylan, before you ended up reaching out for support?
Yeah, I feel like I was struggling with a lot of things. I was pretty unhappy with my body, with my eating habits. I was starting to kind of come to terms with like disordered eating and kind of naming that and claiming that as and taking it seriously. And kind of admitting that that was a problem for me. Um, and so I was kind of at a point where I had admitted that to myself, but I still hadn't figured out how to fix it yet. I had kind of seen a couple specialists, and I think I was seeing um like a nutritionist at the time, and nothing really felt like it was working. Or if it did work, it was kind of hitting. I had also been in therapy for years at that point. It was kind of hitting like one facet of the problem without kind of looking into the root issues. Or in therapy, it was like all root issues and not any kind of like tangible action that I could take in my life. And so I just felt kind of stuck.
Yeah. And I want to go a little deeper. So, specifically for you, with what you were now feeling, wow, I'm struggling with this eating disorder.
Mhm.
You binge eating? What was your cycle? What kind of behavior were you in?
Yeah, so it was now I feel like it's really clear to me that it was like a years, like decades long relationship with bulimia that had like elements. Like it was such a the binge and purge would kind of be like longer term. So it'd be like months of binging or months of purging. And at that time I had I'm trying to remember, I had like lost a lot of weight and then gained a bunch of weight back. And so I was kind of in like a never ending binging cycle with a lot of like the highs really high and the lows really low. Like the extremes of each were kind of extreme. So when I was purging, I was like so extreme. And when I was binging, it was so extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. What drew you to reach out for support?
I was listening to the eating disorder therapist podcast,
Mhm.
and I remember I was really triggered at work. I was working as a cook, and I was just really kind of struggling with like being around food so much and just constantly having to eat for work and constantly having to even just think about food was just challenging for me and felt like really ironic to me.
Mhm.
And so I would listen to various things like that podcast while I was working, while I was prepping. Um, and you did an interview on there, and I really liked your vibe. And I felt like, as opposed to other kind of approaches, I heard you talk a lot about like kind of these root issues and dealing with like these root issues that all these other behaviors are like stacked on top of. And that really spoke to me because I felt like I had always been like looking for that next diet or the next pill or some kind of something that was going in anything or the next planner, like the next organizational system or like looking for something that was going to kind of switch for me. And I feel like that, like everything you said about like, if you aren't gonna like deal with these root issues, like those behaviors are gonna keep appearing, really spoke to me. And I was like, well, I don't really know like how to fix that yet, but like I could tell that you did, or at least like you talked a lot about your own experience, and your experience sounded a lot like mine. And so it was like, okay, like this does seem like it worked for you, and that it isn't like, some complicated new regimen to follow, or um, this like complicated new product that I need to buy, or um, like that felt really in alignment of like, actually, it's about like taking away these ideas that everything else is kind of resting on. And I was really ambivalent at first. I mean, like I had this really complicated feeling of like, if I have to accept myself, like, do I really want to heal? And then that was such a dark thought to me that like I potentially didn't want to heal if it meant accepting myself. That like that was kind of like the wake up call for me of like how serious the problem was, because I think that like, even though I didn't feel that self-love, it was like such the self-hate was like such an alarm bell for
Mhm.
me, that I was like, oh, okay, like this is a serious problem that needs to be taken, like the response needs to be taken as seriously. And that was really eye-opening for me, that I could kind of feel both like at the same time, if
Yeah.
that makes any sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the thing is when we start to realize the self-hatred or the depth of intensity of what we're doing to ourselves, like it is significant and it is important for us to actually take it seriously and stop being like, it's not a big deal, it's whatever. Like there's this denial that can come along with what we're doing. And obviously that readiness comes at a different time for everybody. And then of course, we connected for a consultation. You came in for your first year, ended up doing a second year as well.
Mhm.
But I want to start at the beginning. So we started working on the binge eating and the bulimia right away. And I want to talk about that. What that we did together that we dove into really started to help you gain traction around those behaviors.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that was super important was like just identifying triggers. And I think that that is a really crazy process, because um, kind of like coming to terms with the fact that like there are so many of them, and just
Hmm.
that I was kind of walking through life in this like state of being like constantly triggered. Um, and then by like naming them, I was able to like see them and kind of like, I mean, I think it's really ironic because it felt so obvious to me after that, that like the very things that I was like doing to try to gain like some sense of control were like the very things that were making it really hard for me. And that's a pattern, I mean, for a lot of people. And I think that's a pattern that I see come up for me in a lot of like other parts of my life. And so I think that was like a really major one. And kind of understanding why, like, I think, and the triggers is part of this. Like, we kind of walked through like the logic that my brain was operating under, and then like picked that apart. And then once that was really like looked at, it doesn't hold under scrutiny. It doesn't hold any kind of like the logic doesn't hold. And so then I was able to kind of break down those moments, which is what I feel like those triggers are, where I was like falling back into that old logic. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, it was hard because like I said, like I was constantly triggered, and sometimes I was being triggered like five different ways
Mhm.
simultaneously. And that was like just with food. That wasn't even like with every other facet of life, which is also happening simultaneously. And I think like part of that is we did like mind mapping and kind of picked apart these fundamental beliefs that are like underpinning all those triggers and decisions, and that's also what I mean of like the logic of like, I still do this sometimes where I'm like, oh, wait a second. I'm like operating under this belief of like skinniness equals health or
Mhm.
skinniness equals happiness. And then if you kind of are like, can work through that logic, then all the behaviors that are stacked up on top of that, some stay the same and some change, but like they're not under this like illusion or delusion of like, oh, I'm doing this because it's healthy, or I'm doing this
Mhm.
like, no, that's a decision based off of an old way of thinking. Uh, and, you know, I want different results. So, like, I'm going to think different thoughts. And so, something as simple as like skinniness equals happiness, it's like, well, I know that there are times when skinny people aren't happy, or like just all the different ways that you can kind of
Mhm.
cut that up and it doesn't make sense under the microscope. It's like, well, that for me at least has been really important of like I need to know why I do the things I do. And then like also on the flip side of that, it's like if I have a really solid logical base for my thinking and what I'm doing, then new healthier behaviors can be stacked on top of that, and it's like solid enough to hold challenging things or
Yeah.
difficult things in a totally different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. And I think it's so important. Awareness is really the first step, like you said, understanding your triggers, that we can have so many different ones. And when
Yeah.
we are walking around with several triggers at once, it's a lot to catch. And what is at the root of those triggers? And this, yeah, this awareness around my mind. And I have this ego that's not the real me that's been programmed to call the shots. And now I need to learn, like you said, dissect it all, understand it and take my power back because there is a you inside of you that is the true you that hasn't been given the attention or the time, right? And this is what happens as you shift this and as you're just explaining everything that you were. And it's interesting what you said earlier about some of the habits and things that I had learned were actually the very things that were triggering me to continue to self-sabotage with food. Do you want to talk about some of those things? Because we really worked on like the diet mentality, like almost like a diet addiction, right? Where
Yeah.
yeah, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was like a really meticulous tracker.
Mm,
Like a like border, I mean, I think very obsessively compulsively.
hmm
Um and I was a really meticulous, like I weighed myself multiple times a day. I tracked every calorie I ate really obsessively. I weighed my food really obsessively. I had a lot of food fears and just a lot of like, I was thinking about this earlier, like just a lot of like all or nothing mentality in like everything I did. It wasn't just with food, but it was like just everything was like very dramatic and kind of extreme in that like yeah, so like I would I would snap down so hard on myself that like and restrict so intensely and try so like I would put these controlling parameters around my life and my actions that were like literally impossible for anybody to maintain. And then when I would inevitably fail at those things, then it was like, oh, like another excuse to like hate myself, punish myself. You know, I had this ongoing obsession with not being lazy. I mean, that's still
Mhm.
something I struggle with. And like a lot of feelings about my willpower and how hard I can work or not work, which is just, you know, leftover childhood stuff. And then, you know, when your body is so hungry
Mhm.
because it's not getting nourished, then it's like the second you do lose control, it's that much more extreme. And, you know, it's like I feel like we have like little, it's interesting, like living in the city, I walk more. I'm physically more exhausted and I don't have a car anymore. And like it's so interesting to see like when you're like stuck out in the city and you're hungry and you can't find something to eat and it's like that next meal, it's like such a vulnerable moment. And I think like I took a lot of these really vulnerable moments that I was having that were like self-created. And now it's easy to be like, oh, you're very hungry. You're not, you know, in the best state of mind because your like body is so hungry and tired. And instead of kind of having the compassion of like that's a normal way that a brain reacts under those circumstances, it was like now here's even more proof of my unworthiness, now here's even more
Mhm.
proof of my laziness or my lack of willpower, which requires that much more restriction and that much more diligence in like controlling that part of myself, um which you know just keeps that cycle perpetuating and more extreme. And so it's like, you know, I've had periods in my life where I was eating like 400 calories a day, which is just like so sad. And it's like if you did that to any animal, any person that's not yourself, it would be so easy to see like, you know, when they get a taste of something forbidden, it's like your brain is like goes crazy for that
Mhm.
thing, which is just like a normal biological response to starvation.
Mhm.
And so I think like that goes back to that kind of understanding like the brain and what it's doing in those moments and then having compassion for being normal. Um, that kind of like cuts through that behavior. Whereas
Mhm.
now it's like, okay, when I'm super, super hungry, you know, one, I try not to get super, super hungry, but I'm not going to punish myself for
Right.
acting like a human or, you know, being normal in that situation. I think that is
Yeah.
like a really unfortunate part of kind of our culture's obsession with fat phobia is like, um, I was like one of the biggest perpetrators of fat phobia in my own personal life in all those beliefs of like, you know, laziness and willpower and
Mhm.
all that stuff that are just like not my own personal beliefs, but were like put onto me. And so, again, that's like, if you take away those things, it's like there's just a human in there
Mhm.
trying to regulate itself and be nourished, and like hungry for compassion too. And so then it's like, okay, well, how do I want to be in a different cycle of like, you know, being not even being that hungry in the first place is a big part of not
Mhm.
losing control. Like that's kind of counterintuitive, but it's like uh I don't know, it's a really painful process to kind of realize how bad I'd been to myself and how
Mhm.
like unkind I had been to myself. So, I mean, in all those actions of constantly weighing myself, constantly seeking control elsewhere, it's like constantly outsourcing my sense of
Mhm.
self-worth to these other things. Um, and then making decisions. from that place instead of in alignment with like somebody who loves myself or loves other people, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it is a process and a painful process because when we start to build awareness, we really do start to see how we have been with ourselves. And I think that's why self-forgiveness is so important and the compassion, like you said. And we're so emotionally hungry for compassion when we have been fighting with ourselves and punishing ourselves. And that's part of what's fueling the hunger. It's not just the physical deprivation, it is this I am longing for connection and love and kindness. And it does feel that emotional hunger and physical hunger. And you're right, like sometimes the human kicks in. It's like you're out in the middle of your day running errands, the blood sugar crashes, we wait a little too long to eat. And it is a normal human response. We're going to get an energy drop and a bit of that hanger kicking in. And then the power, though, is that when we are equipped with how to navigate that and we know what a blood sugar crash is and that we don't have to be hard on ourselves or all of a sudden just go to town and go full blown binge and like, okay, I'm going to find something, everything's going to be okay, I'm safe, this is my body communicating with me. Man, do we ever take our power back with being equipped with that awareness, but that it doesn't have to snowball into an all or nothing scenario. And I'm so glad that you really like can see that shift, right? Because
Yeah.
it can be a vulnerable moment that can turn into an even more vulnerable moment if we don't know how to navigate it.
Yeah, and just like a never ending. I mean, it's
Yeah.
never ending. If like that's the thing too, is I think I always was like, well, this someday this is just gonna like go away. Or I'm gonna fix this someday, but it's like, no, I actually like I'm gonna have to work. Like this is not gonna just like be this little side project that I,
Hmm.
you know, can like kind of put like 10% effort into. It's like, no, this hat as was so deeply ingrained that it's like, no, it has to be a full-time project that I'm kind of obsessed with in the same way
Hmm.
of like I've been obsessed with, you know, tracking and
Hmm.
counting and controlling.
Yeah, no, well said. So, yeah, there was a lot going on with needing to try and control the food and the amount to try and control the number on the scale and lose weight. How did it feel for you when you started to catch your triggers, started to prevent the binges and purges, and actually were able to work through the triggers? How did that feel for you that you were gaining this traction and starting to overcome the behavior?
I mean, it felt really good. I think it felt it's interesting because there's this kind of like delay where like I had to like do a lot of the actions before my brain was fully there yet
Hmm.
and kind of do and that's where I feel like the logic is so important for me in like all parts of my life because it's like well if it makes sense to me logically then I can trust that my emotions are going to catch up, right? So I really like mourned like not weighing myself. I mourned like I was really afraid. I had a lot of
Hmm.
fear and I just like was really scared that if I like gave up these like I was just like so convinced that that's the things that were like keeping me from like just completely losing
Hmm.
control, completely going off the rails. Even though if you'd asked me like what that looked like, I couldn't have told you because I didn't really know. Um, but like I think I felt like up until that point I was like constantly keeping this thing back at
Hmm.
bay. And that if I just like let go of those actions that I would just be like vulnerable to whatever that like intangible scary future was. Um and so yeah, I mean when I first started there was a lot of ambivalence because I was kind of like faking it till I make it, right? Like of
Hmm.
just like, okay, I understand logically everything makes sense to me. And so there's kind of this like period of time where like your brain has to internalize it and has to like, the roots of these issues are so deep, they're like 30 years deep. And so I think for the first year, I was like, yeah, I'm doing the things
Mhm.
and I'm just trusting that like the self-love is going to come.
Mhm.
But it wasn't there yet. And I think that was like, it really moves me now because, you know, that like decision was really powerful to like be like, no, I'm going to do it anyway because it makes sense to me. And I'm just going to trust that like someday I'm going to feel better,
Mhm.
even though right now I don't like my body. I
Mhm.
don't, like having to give up these things. I miss like even just like awful things. Like I remember you saying like, making yourself throw up is like this deep lack of an ability to take responsibility.
Mhm.
And I was like, dang, like that's so true. Like, but like that's also like been my escape pod
Mhm.
from any situation of like if I don't feel good, if I, like all of these coping mechanisms are
Yeah.
just kind of ripped away.
Yeah.
And so, it felt incredible to be like making different decisions, but there was also like a lot of kind of fear and vulnerability of like, but I haven't become like who I want to be yet. I'm just like taking away.
Mhm.
But like the stuff hasn't gotten filled in with all the goodness that, now is so obvious to me, but it's like it takes time for those like deeper root issues to like come up and be dealt with, come up and be
Yeah.
dealt with. It's like there's the conceptual and then there's like actual tangible like um change. And that honestly comes from like being triggered and kind of spiraling out a little bit.
Mhm.
And it's like that takes time too. So I mean it felt really good, but I think there was a lot of like ambivalence there too.
Yeah, and it is uncomfortable because, like you said, it's 30 years of habits,
Yeah.
behaviors, programming, thoughts, ways of being, your safety zone, your comfort zone, even though purging was a safety zone, even though trying to control everything with counting and weighing in, etc., was a comfort zone, right? It's when we start to take you out of that and create a new comfort zone and new ways of being, there's a lot of emotion and grief. And the brain, you're right, it takes time for the brain to regrow these new parts and dissolve the old, which
Mhm.
is now this is safe. Catching triggers, taking responsibility, loving myself, compassion. This is what's safe and familiar now. Now what's unsafe and unfamiliar is these old ways of being. And that's what we have
Yeah.
to be so patient on the journey because it does take time to shift. And I'm glad that you brought that up because it is a process and it's not like you get started and the next day everything's resolved and it's like, oh, that was just so easy and great, right? Like there is emotion every step of the way, but like you said, it starts to really integrate after we've spent some time shifting it.
Yeah.
And it is just something that we have to be willing to walk through that discomfort. But would you say that that's where the accountability and support and being able to reach out whenever you needed help and having regular sessions really kind of helped with that discomfort, helped with those
Oh,
fears?
yes, absolutely. Because that's the thing is like there's like there's things about my process are like very individual, but
Mhm.
also they're very like universal. Like they're also just like how humans work.
Mhm.
And so I think like working with you, and especially working for like 2 years, it's like things come up at different times and like things, um, like new triggers will present themselves or life will just change in a way that like something that wasn't really coming up as often is now coming
Mhm.
up to be dealt with more or something that was a huge deal is like not coming up as often. And so I think that like you are such like a kind of font of knowledge in like a lot of different arenas. There's like always go like you have not, every answer to every question, but it's like there's not like some crazy new trigger you've never heard of, or it's like there's kind of this like fundamental through line of like the ego working through everything, and that like you can kind of recognize what my brain's doing, even if I'm like, I don't know what's going on, I don't know what's happening, I just don't feel good, this is what's going on. It's like having someone to be like, okay, this is what's happening. And I think that's what's different about therapy, right? It's like I spent years and years in talk therapy, and one of the beautiful things about therapy is that they like have a lot of ethical feelings about giving advice or like giving action steps. And that was something I always really struggled with because I'm like, but I want like tangible help. Like,
Mhm.
I want, if I'm not, if what I'm doing is not helping me, like, I need help figuring out what to do instead. And so that was really beautiful and special about that support too, of like, um, and like being able to text.
Mhm.
It's really helpful because it's like also as simple as like when I'm triggered and I'm in a really hard environment, it's like I can reach out and someone knows like not only what I'm going through, but like all the kind of cloud of things around it because it is a really complicated illness. It's not just physical, it's not just emotional. It's like it's hormonal. It's
Mhm.
like the way you were raised. It's
Mhm.
the like current environment you're in. It's the kind of work you do. Like it's this really holistic problem. And so like the solution needs to be really holistic. And that's what I think I meant earlier of like I was like constantly looking at these like very specific kind of modalities to fix it, like a very holistic problem.
Mhm.
And so, it's super helpful if, like, my background, generally what my major triggers are. And so it's really helpful to have someone be like, okay, this is what's happening.
Mhm.
Because I think especially in moments like that, you're just like, what is happening right now? And that's when it's easy to be like really hard on yourself, of like, why am I like this?
Mhm.
Is like such a hard way to go around the world of like, why are you like this? Why are you like this? And
Yeah.
it's like, if you can be like, I'm like this because X, Y, and Z, and that's my ego, and just you can like pick it apart. And so it's like by having one-on-one support with you, it's like you play out that mental process as a back and forth conversation together that eventually the individual learns to like have that conversation with themselves, of like, so then now instead of texting you, I can be like, why am I like this? What is going on? And then the trained part of me that trained with you for 2 years essentially can be like, oh, okay, you're doing this because this, and this. And so, um, that is you're like training how you want to talk to yourself and how you want to deal with. And that's also like, holding yourself accountable in really
Yeah.
intense ways too, not always just like compassionate, but just like being really direct with me and, holding myself accountable too.
Yeah, which is important. I think being able to encourage you to be like, hey, even if you're struggling with something, like reach out and just be honest about it, right? Because that honesty and authenticity of what you're struggling with, something came up again, it's going to help you on the healing versus if you don't share everything, if you're holding back, being
Yeah.
dishonest, like you're only hurting yourself in the journey. And that's one of the things I really appreciated about you is your authenticity and being so open and honest about what you were dealing with and what you were feeling. And yeah, I think the accountability is huge because it's so true. When you start dealing with something and you're in the midst of a million triggers and the willpower and you suck and something's wrong. What is it's like you feel like you're crazy, because you don't understand the inner workings of everything and how it's all connected and how it's fueling these habits and behaviors. And when you start to be able to, like you said, gain that awareness and have it be explained to you, guess what? Now you have that awareness and you have the knowledge and tools. Therefore, you're able to do it on your own. And that's the ultimate goal here, is so that you have it, you can heal it. And then no matter what comes up in your life, you're going to have the awareness tools and the ability to work through it and get to the other side without hurting, without sabotaging. There's going to be ups and downs with life, but that you're equipped with the tools. So I'm really glad that you really you took full, I don't think advantage is the right word, ownership, and you really used the whole coaching program. You reached out in Voxer, you came to your sessions, right? Like all the tools, everything, which is totally the key when we shift this and heal this. So I want to talk now a little bit more about physical health, because we've been talking a
Mhm.
lot about the habits, behaviors, and the mindset. So how actually want to talk about your hormones first, because we did a really thorough hormone test and we actually uncovered something that was going on for you with your thyroid that had not been uncovered,
Yeah.
based off like previous testing and investigations. So do you want to talk a little bit about that process and why it
Yeah.
was really empowering for you?
Yeah, so I have Hashimoto's, which is like a autoimmune disease that attacks your thyroid. And it was something that I was like kind of aware of. Like I know my mom has it. I
Mm-hmm.
had like seen an endocrinologist when I was in high school, but I like hadn't ever really been consistent, and I just didn't like investigate it fully, and
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of again didn't really take it seriously as like an actual issue. Um and so yeah, we did testing. My thyroid was like way, 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 way off. And now it's like so alarming to me that I was just like walking around like, I mean, I think that's what's crazy about all of it, right? Is like it's not like if I just was like totally healthy and then I woke up the next morning feeling how I did 3 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be, what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is an emergency, right? But it's like it's so gradual, it's over your whole life that it's like now it feels so easy to see, but at the time I was like, this is just what it feels like to be me. Which is really tired, incapable of losing weight, um, just very, I mean, it's also like, it's for me, it really showcases like how fundamental our hormones are to like our experience of the world and just our lives and our thoughts, because it's like affecting every part of our being.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I was just walking around untreated. And now it's like I it's I think I still sometimes I still will catch myself like not taking it as seriously. Like I would maybe like if someone else was like, I have an autoimmune disease, and it's causes chronic illness. Like I wouldn't, I just sometimes don't consider myself in that same category of like someone who struggles with like a chronic autoimmune disease.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even though that's very true. Like I am constantly like, wait a minute, like I'm chronically ill. Like I need to, you know, be lighter on myself, or, if I need a rest, like that's not lazy, or still kind of unworking those.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that was, a wake up call. One, because untreated, it can just like wreck your body, lead to cancer, and kill you. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, it just, if I continued to um, disregard it and kind of like not take it into consideration, like, who knows how bad I would have felt. Um, I think too, like really shifting from like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna take a pill and it's gonna fix it, like to everything that I do affects my hormones and is part of that was a big shift for me, and something I still like work on as a motivator for doing the things I do.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, it was now it's like such a kind of boring part of my life in that like I'm so used to taking my meds every day and just with I didn't like for a long time the idea that I would have to take like, you know, thyroid hormones for the rest of my life. But it's like again, the idea of like, well, this is gonna just take care of itself someday. Or like this is just it's an issue now, but it's gonna go away. It's like no, like taking accountability and like
Hmm.
taking, you know, even Western medicine is like oh, you could never, you know, go into like remission for it, essentially,
Hmm.
even though, like I definitely can
Hmm.
and will. And I'm
Hmm.
definitely like walking the path of doing that. And
Yes.
so I think that that is like, um, you know, a fundamental shift that is kind of like the least sexy part of my story of recovery, you know, because I think it's like, pretty subtle, but also like very important of like because you know if I don't take my meds for a day or I eat something crazy for a day, it's not like gonna ruin my life, but
No.
like not caring for myself for another 30 years will. And so that's
Yes.
where I think it's like that the that can be kind of counter to that like wanting immediate gratification, right? Or like
Yeah.
also like 3 years later, it's like there's still a lot of work for me to do on my thyroid. And
Hmm.
that's kind of like one of those things that it's like a slower, more subtle process than like my eating habits changing radically or losing a lot of weight or you know just these different things that kind of like on the surface seem really obvious, but that yeah, like again, that's another way that I was really like screwing myself because a lot of the things I was doing to try to get control were like really harming my thyroid.
Yeah.
And if my thyroid's not working, I can't really do anything.
Yeah. It has a
Um,
big impact.
yeah,
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's so interesting though, hey, because when we went on the journey at first, you probably didn't think that your bulimia would lead you to uncovering an unidentified thyroid issue, high cortisol, high inflammatory, like all these things that were having a big impact on your physical, mental, emotional, energetic health that were indirect triggers, in some different ways, right? And I think I'm glad you haven't like latched on to like I have this autoimmune illness. I think while we want to acknowledge what we're dealing with, it doesn't have to become this thing that is an inhibitor to us living a life that we love. And you're right, Western medicine doesn't want you to think you can bring it into remission, and we know that you can. And we've
yeah,
seen your antibodies drop significantly in those tests, which is the proof of the work that you did and that you're doing is helping your body to heal. And that's the mindset that I encourage all the listeners and you to continue to keep front and center. The body's always trying to heal. It's just I innocently am getting in the way, or there's a
yeah,
piece of information I'm missing that I need to figure out. And that's why support and testing is so important and testing regularly. And it's funny, one of the most non sexy parts of the journey, 100%. But it is, in a way, I feel like we all inherit these different imbalances or different parts of our journey that are part of what keep us accountable, right? So like you have Hashimoto's, I have hypothyroid, and it's quite managed, but if certain things start to shift, I can feel my thyroid start to go off as
Yeah.
well, and it impacts everything. And that's one of my warning bells. And I know it, and I'm not gonna let it get so bad that now I'm like so exhausted and brain fogged and like so puffy and I can't function. So we
Yeah.
all have these bodies like signals, and it's like, are you willing to figure out what they are and actually learn to listen to them? Because we can prevent a lot if we actually tend to them and don't let the signal get too loud, right? So I'm not glad you have Hashimoto's, but I'm glad it's one of your anchors that keeps reminding you this is why I'm choosing to heal and tend to myself the way that I am and make sure I'm taking care of myself. And you're right, it's not about perfection, but it is about the balance of going, I want to take care of myself in a way that is going to support my healing, which is exactly what you're doing and what you learn to do on the journey. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for sharing a little bit more about the
Yeah.
hormone piece. And of course, like you had said earlier, a lot of times when it comes to a thyroid issue, you're told, well, you're not going to be able to lose weight. You
Yeah.
have Hashimoto's, you're not going to be able to lose weight. You're not going to be able to, this isn't going to happen anymore because blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what a falsehood to share. And that's actually what I want to talk about next. One of the last pieces, because obviously this weight body battle was a huge part of what was keeping you in the, binge eating and the diets and restriction and being told, oh yeah, once you lose weight, everything will be perfect, right? And all of that.
Yeah.
And I know that was a part of the journey for you, which was like detaching from needing to lose weight. But the interesting thing for you was the more you detached and like did what you needed to do for yourself, it's like it started to just shift
Yeah.
without direct focus, right?
Yeah. It's insane. Like
Yeah.
that's I think the thing that's crazy is like even like in the past year, like I have cared less than I have ever cared in my entire life about losing weight, and I have done less to actively lose weight than I've ever done in my entire life.
Hmm.
And I have lost a lot of weight, and I think like that was always like this kind of carrot
Hmm.
hanging in the distance, even in our first 2 years together, where I was like, yeah, I'm gonna like do these things, but really what I want is to lose weight. Like
Hmm.
it was still a want. Like it was
Yeah.
still like that was, I think, the part that was like faking it till I make it, where it was like that was still like a fundamental like pain.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting because like I was laughing with my friend about that the other day because like I just used to like track calories so obsessively, and now I feel like the only time I look at calories, I'm like, oh, thank God. Like
Yeah.
I need more calories. Like I'm trying not to lose weight too quickly, and I'm trying not, like I'm like, oh, there's, 300 calories. Like I'll take it,
Hmm.
and where it's just so funny to me because now I'm like in this kind of like eat now because I might be hungry later. And I'm like walking so much and just living in the city. I'm like, let me nourish myself while I can. But it's just funny because I do tell myself all the time, like, or like yeah, I mean, I tell myself, like, if you didn't lose another pound, like, or I just go through that mental process of like, what if I just never lost another pound ever again for the rest of my life? Like, this is what I want to be comfortable with now.
Hmm. Yeah.
And really focusing on that.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, my it is just funny because I was talking about that I was gonna have this conversation with you and just that it's so crazy how much weight I've lost, and it's honestly kind of annoying to have to like buy new clothes and like just it's like so effortless after being like such an effortful
Hmm.
thing in my life for decades. Um but like and she's like, well, what do you think, like I was like, I just feel like, I'm like safe now and I'm like letting go of protection. And she's like, well, what do you think, like, was making you feel so unsafe. And I mean, it's like, I really do feel like I was like, when I was alone with myself in my body, like that was a bullying relationship. That was an abusive relationship. Whereas now, which made me never want to be alone,
Mm-hmm.
which made me want to like numb out when I was alone.
Yeah.
It like made me afraid to be with myself, which is valid when like that person is mean.
Yeah, of course.
Um, like in the same way of like if I had to be trapped in a room with someone that hated me, like I would
Yeah.
also probably be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, I don't feel super comfortable here."
Yeah.
Someone's just like in the corner glaring at you. Um, but and so like that's kind of the irony too of like, I had to really work on that.
Hmm.
And that was really like that underpinning of like I hate myself, I hate myself, I hate myself was like this silent thing that was happening all the time. That I had to change that to like I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. What do I do? Like what does someone do when they love themselves?
Yeah.
And then make decisions from there. And that's also what I mean of like I didn't feel that right away. I
No.
didn't feel that for 2 years. So I had to make a lot of like, you know, the the answer to that question, what does someone do when they love themselves, is like very disruptive to, or it was for me very disruptive to my former life. It
Yeah.
was well, actually, that means I got divorced, or
Yeah.
actually, that means I moved to another city, or actually, that means I like changed the job I was at, or how I
Yeah.
even, interact with work, or like, or dieting. Like, it's like I am like pretty hardcore of like, if anything even sounds like a diet,
Hmm.
I'm like, I can't do that. Like,
Yeah.
I that's like a very hardcore boundary for me. And so, you know, I think that kind of like took a while for me to like become a safe place for
Hmm.
myself. But now I'm so grateful that I did it because it's like, one, I love spending time with myself.
Yeah.
Like, I genuinely really enjoy hanging out alone. And that's not this like fraught, scary thing anymore.
Yeah.
It's actually like a source of joy and like pleasure and fun and companionship in this way of like I think you said earlier, it's like I think, and I'm this is a generalization, but I do believe it. It's like I think everyone's like really, really, really hard on themselves, and like that desire for like love and companionship is like because they're that need is not being met within themselves, and
Yeah.
they're not that like wound of like self-worth
Yeah.
is like this hole that everyone is just like throwing everything that they possibly can into it to try to fill it, and it's like never working for them. And like I think different religions call that different things, but it's like it is just like fundamentally suffering. And like when we're like, I want to stop this cycle, like I don't want to do this anymore, but like that requires looking at that kind of like wound,
Yeah.
the really hard truth of like I have been really shitty to myself, and I have really like harmed myself, and it was valid that my body didn't feel safe because I was punishing it. And
Yeah.
so um and like on the flip side of that too of like, okay, like being brave enough to make the radical life changes that reflect
Yeah.
self and to be authentic in like what that looks like is also very like difficult and scary too. But like on the other side of that is like freedom from that. Like I do feel like that was and obviously I'm saying that like I don't still struggle with that, but like um compared to like what it was before is like then you can actually give yourself things that are going to fill that and like repair that. And it's like it will eventually go away if it's actually getting worked on versus just like, you know, pumping cigarettes into it is like,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, the
not going to
dopamine
fill
high.
that pothole.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And I agree. I think everyone and most people, unless they've done this healing to whatever regard, are trying to fill the void with all these external things that will never fill the void, no matter what they are. And we have to be willing to go to these uncomfortable places and repair our worth. Remember the level of love and power we have, that we're these powerful human beings, and reprogram the mind because we've just been so conditioned that we're worthless and useless and not good enough. And you're right, we got to fake it till we make it. And it's so interesting, hey, how whatever it is that we're focusing on trying to heal, if we're trying to force it and push it and control it, what we resist persists, right? And so, of course, for you, because the weight was such a big thing for so long, she resisted letting go because she did not feel safe. And now, like you said, you're so detached. It's happening because there's a safety, and your nervous system is able to regulate to a level that, was not possible before. And that's when it happens, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of good to be at the point where you're like, oh, I'm kind of annoyed I have to get new clothes. Oh,
Yeah.
wow, like I need to make sure I eat enough. And when that
Mhm.
becomes the new norm and the dynamic, it's like, wow, like there's my markers that I am in detachment and that I am actually in this flip where I'm tending to my needs. And yeah, if this is all that is, if this is it, I can love myself and accept myself here. And the irony of it is then we let go of more because it's just
Yeah.
the safety and what's my natural set point. And I'm glad that your body is letting go, and we knew that she would when she was ready, but it happens at a different time for everybody. And we can have phases where it happens more for a while and then it stops for a bit and more for a while, but it's just really getting curious about why, and then
Mhm.
continuing to like tend to your temple, tend to yourself, give yourself
Well,
what you
and you can
need.
like you can say you're detached and still be like incredibly
Oh, for
attached.
sure.
And I think that that's where like the practices come in,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, I guess it's like both are okay to be true at the same time. Like, it's okay to still be struggling with those thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
but like, it's, or like, you could do everything textbook right and tell Amber, everything's fine. But it's like, if you fundamentally aren't dealing with the issues, they are going to persist. And I think that that's like what I would want people to take away from this conversation is like, are you going through the motions, but not actually like fundamentally changing your mind? And like, how can you fundamentally change your mind? Because then it doesn't really matter. Like, the actions are going to look different for different people. And like, it's not in the actions. Yes, the actions are perfect and they're like there to like create a framework to do that deeper work. And that's a great, like, I'm 100% here for faking it till you make it. That's how you do anything. It's like playing
Mm-hmm.
pretend at all these things you want. But it's like at a certain point, like you have to commit to like actually changing.
Yeah.
And I think that was what held me back for so many years was I was like, yeah, I love myself. Yeah. But it's like, but I
Mm-hmm.
was still making decisions that were like saying, I hate you, I hate you, I
Yeah.
hate you. While like maybe I was telling other people, yeah, I love my body the way it is.
Yeah.
Um, like that disconnect was
Yeah.
just what was like keeping me stuck. And it's
Yeah.
like that's so scary to like hear because it's like no, like it's not gonna like you, Amber, can't like magically do that work for anyone.
No.
And I think is like what's scary is like, and maybe I wouldn't have enjoyed hearing that early days. Like I was like, maybe I needed to believe that you could like magically change it. It's like, no, you can just like move our mind through the steps to get there, but it's like something that it has to be 24/7, like internalized into your actual being. I think that's
Mhm.
like what's so hard to communicate to people of like, um, that's gonna like if it took 30 years to be programmed one way, it's
Mhm.
gonna take more than 6 months to
Yeah,
reprogram your entire brain and like fundamental worldview.
100%.
And so like that's where the faking it till you make it comes, and trusting that you will make it
Yeah.
is like so beautiful, but like really challenging. Like I
Oh
feel for
yeah.
my past self of like, all those times that I was like so trying so hard. Like I really
Yeah.
was trying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the thing is but that's why the support and accountability is so powerful because it is a process and it's going to take time to change it, but being reminded of the outcome and why you're here and why you're doing this through those hard days or
Yeah.
the struggles is the key because it like anything worth changing, it's going to have its ups and downs, but just knowing and like you said, having that trust that it's going to change, right? And then you see the light at the end of the tunnel as you catch your triggers, and then it gets a little closer, and then you start to feel more energy, and then you get your next test back, and your antibodies dropped over 100 points, and like all these things just keep accumulating, and it's like you're moving in the right direction. You will get there. Um, and even if something comes up again, you're now equipped. And that's really
And
the
you
key.
wouldn't have signed up if you didn't have that part of you that knew you were worth that. Like that's a
Yeah.
time commitment, it's a money commitment, but it's like that, it's a commitment to yourself
Yeah.
and that like vision of like you deserve better, even if you don't know exactly what that looks or feels like.
Yeah.
You can still commit to that. And
Hmm.
like that is where the support is so helpful because it's not going to be this like linear thing. It's like there are going to be times where you feel like you're going backwards, but
Yeah.
actually that's like the trigger going back is not actually going backwards. It's like just this fundamental like part of the process.
Hmm.
And that's what I mean too of like you've walked that process, so you can be like, oh, that's normal. Whereas, like,
Hmm.
maybe if you were by yourself, you'd abandon yourself at that moment
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
give up or self-sabotage even in that moment. And like, take your ego would take advantage of like,
Yeah.
a moment of vulnerability to like convince you to not even like keep working on it.
Yeah. You're so right. I totally agree with that. So that's what I want to kind of ask you next. Why would you recommend this support? Why is it beneficial for people?
Um, So many reasons. I mean, I do feel like you helped me more than anyone, any therapist, any kind of like nutritionist has ever helped me in this really like beautiful, beautiful way. And I think that um like if someone can, they should commit to like the max that they're able to. The most amount of time they can, the deepest level of, involvement. Um, and I think if like people are considering it, it's like that is the part of you that desperately wants you to wake up and like love yourself. Because that's the thing is like you do contain that. Like and I think you can like get there different ways. Like sometimes I think about like little Dylan and how easy it is to like love. Like if I met my child self, like how much love I would feel for that child and how easy it is to love other versions of yourself and not the one you currently are.
Hmm.
And then kind of extrapolating that into the future of like, well, if you always feel that way about your past selves, trust that logically there's a future version of you that feels that way about you now. And like, can you access that love that you do contain for yourself, but that's just like buried deep down there? Um, because that is really what it is it's like you are like making a commitment to yourself. And I think that that is like, you know, I always think everyone should go to therapy, but like I think that it's different than therapy because you're actually having tangible like a framework, right?
Mhm.
Um and it's more involved than just kind of showing up and discussing and then going home and showing up and discussing. It's like showing up, discussing, and then having actionable steps with someone that's actually really knowledgeable about all these different facets. And I think that that's also like what's really great about you is like it is going to look different for everyone. Like there are going to be different things that are like bigger struggles or non-issues for people. And so it's like that holistic approach is able to kind of adapt for the individual because like the problem is so individual
Mhm.
and the roots are so individual that like that's why I would recommend it. And then that's not even getting into like the business freedom element of like the next kind of graduated step of like once you have these body issues and like the individual person issues getting worked on, then you kind of open up to like, well, how am I like self-sabotaging in other facets of my life that don't have anything to do with my body or, or that I think don't have anything to do with my body that seem unrelated, but it's like that ability to go from like massive scale life to like individual triggers, I think is like something that as someone that's tried a lot of different therapy, a lot of different things, a lot of different approaches, I haven't found a lot of things that kind of compare to like being able to adapt to that scale.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And what you said earlier about if you can, like go for the biggest commitment, go for that year. Why did you say that? Why do you think that's important?
Well, I did a year and then I
Mhm.
signed up for another year. So we
Mhm.
did 2 years together and then I took a break, but like I would totally come back in future years because
Mhm.
I think that I mean, so it's been 3 years since we started working together. It's been a year since we stopped. And I just like within the last year feel like all that work that I did
Mhm.
became internalized. Like
Yeah.
it takes time
Yeah.
for your mind to change.
Yeah.
Like if we're talking about fundamental change, even 3 years to 30, I don't know what that math is, but like that's such a tiny percentage, but
Yeah.
it's still a percentage. Like it's not, if this is not a problem that's going to be solved in a month,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be solved in 6 months. It's not even really going to be solved in a year. I mean, I think the fundamental issues can be worked on in that time, but like the internalizing is like just now, 3 years in, I'm finally getting to some stuff that I feel like we wanted to work on
Mhm.
at the beginning that like just felt so hard because it's like because it's such a fundamental like holistic problem, it's like you have to kind of move methodically through your life and like deal with these massive
Yeah.
changes. And so, you know, for any big life change like that, it's like I feel like my body takes time to like internalize and like you have to think about it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like if I mean, it's like the idea of like take it home, put it in your pot and cook it. Like it requires time to like process
Mhm.
ideas and to like come up against walls and to challenge it. It's like if it can't hold up under challenging like the logic, then the logic doesn't hold. But like you still need time to like challenge it and
Mhm.
to even like try something else for a while and come back and be like, okay, that didn't feel good,
Mhm.
even just in like the really tangible of like hormone health. Like, yes, you can see like dramatic changes in a 6 month period of hormone testing, but like we're talking about massive changes that take like,
Mhm.
it takes time for like herbs to build up in the body and for the body to
Yeah.
adapt and like different things. Like that's just talking about like supplements. So
Yeah.
like, and supplements were like a big thing that we worked on, but it was also like a small percentage of what we
Yeah.
like that was just one part of what we worked on. And so it's like, you know, just the thyroid stuff alone, it's like, yeah, it takes that long for your body to be like, oh, okay, like we're doing things differently now.
Yeah, yeah, you're so right. And I think it is, like you said, it's going to look different for each person. And that's why I always am just so for the holistic approach and that we can see significant changes. And that's why I always say in the consultation, the average amount of time that I spend working with someone is like 12 to 18 months. But a lot of
Yeah.
women end up doing 2 years. I have women that have done 3 or 4 years. And it doesn't mean we're working on the very same thing we did when on day one. It's like now they're realizing, oh my gosh, I've got this to heal. I want to do that with you. Or
Yeah.
wow, yeah, now I want to do more business. I want to heal my relationship with money, whatever it is. And it's it's just so powerful when we're willing to go deep and we're willing to go to those places. And I'm really
Well, and
glad
that's
that you
an
saw
old
that.
way of thinking too, right? Like, I mean, that's like that quick fix mentality of
Yeah. Yeah.
if you are doing the things that you did before, you're
Hmm.
gonna get the exact same results. And
Hmm.
so if you give up on something after 3 months because it didn't immediately radically change your life in 3 months, like you're going to find that that happens, that you're in that cycle
Yeah.
of like quick fixes failing you
Yeah.
because they don't work. And so I think that that's also part of it is like, I don't want like now when I think quick fix, I think like quick failure.
Hmm.
Because it's like there's no way that something's gonna radically change my life in 3 months. Like
Yeah.
that's just not how my brain works. Yes, you can see like insane differences. That doesn't mean don't do something for three
Yeah.
months. It's just like what's 3 months to 30 years? Like that's just
Yeah.
a joke of like the scale of our lives. And
Yeah.
when you're if you're talking to someone that's 50 years old, then that scale is even tinier,
Yeah.
and so it's like that kind of like that's the old way of thinking that got me where I was.
Hmm.
And so like slowing down and like taking the time to really do things right is like another way that you can like take action even if you don't feel like you're there yet. Like that is like slowing down and doing things right is like a big one for me because I
Hmm.
am so, let's go, let's go, let's go. Like I am very impatient.
Yeah.
And so like you know, but like even in that impatience, it's like pull that away. There's like a fundamental discomfort with like accepting things the way they are and like being in the moment. And it's like, okay, that's what needs to get worked on. Like those
Yeah.
fundamental issues are what needs to get worked on. And so like if you aren't having those conversations with yourself, like unfortunately you're not taking full advantage of like the work you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I totally agree. How has this healing work changed your life?
I mean, it's fundamental. It's like so beautiful. It really like moves me because I like was so I mean just like in a way that my life is like unrecognizable to me, and I think about like I was visiting family in Oregon and listening to your podcast a lot and I like signed up for consultation. It was like we were going to have a consultation when I got back. And Oregon just is like where I grew up and it's a very like still very triggering place. I feel like I was just like so unhappy. Like I was just like so uncomfortable in my body and in my life and I like didn't know how to fix it and I feel like a lot of compassion for I feel a lot of compassion for that girl and also like deep, deep love and gratitude because it's like I was just desperately reaching out for support.
Mhm.
Um, when I like got myself to like dry land without even knowing like what I was really doing.
Mhm.
Um, and so, it's really, really beautiful. And, then it also like has these even bigger implications of like, then I am able to be like a kinder, more loving person in my life. And, you know, I practice Buddhism, and a big part of that is like, or at least within my lineage and my practice, is like not just ending suffering for yourself, but like ending suffering for all beings. And it's like if I'm sick and hating myself and so exhausted and in this like endless shame cycle, like I can't be of service to the world
Mhm.
either. And I think that that is kind of like an underrated part of it. Like, how you show up in your life. It wasn't like I was being an asshole to people, but it's like there's no way that I wasn't, inadvertently spreading these ideas of like shame and
Mhm.
seeking worth outside of yourself and, all those kind of fundamental beliefs, like they affect like how we move through our world and like how we interact with people too. And so, it changed my life in really fundamental ways, and my life, is so radically different, like just in the details of my life, but
Yeah.
and how it feels. But I think also like it gave me a really deep understanding of that like void that everyone else is carrying around. And like it's easy for me to see when other people are like suffering from the same things, like how to help them and love them
Mhm.
and be kinder and more compassionate to them, and to challenge those like beliefs that they're having about themselves, because I'm not perpetuating them anymore in
Yeah.
my world.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad that it's shifted into such a beautiful
Be
space
so
and you
happy.
deserve it. Oh, yes, this is it. This is why I do this. Because it is about healing and it is about healing yourself so that then you can be of service in whatever way for, the healing of this planet. So, is there anything else you want to share before we complete for today?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Love you so much, and I'm really
Oh.
grateful. I'm really grateful, Amber. Thank you.
Oh, Dylan, I love you too, and I'm so honored and blessed that we were brought together to do this healing, and I'm so proud of you and the healing and the change that you decided to come forward to receive and to step into. And as I always say in the podcast, like this is what happens when you do the work. The world truly becomes like your place to create and be and do what you want, and that's only going to continue for you. So truly, thank you for blessing me with your presence today and coming on the podcast to share your journey. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
yeah, and I hope the audience, I hope you just resonate with this and it's just further proof that if I can do it, if Dylan can do it, you can also do it too.
Truly, truly.